All right, welcome to our annual State of the Industry report. This is one of our favorite talks to give. With me is Bart Watson. Dr. Bart Watson is Chief Economist for the Brewers Association, and I'm Paul Gatza, Director of the Brewers Association. And what we're going to do today is, a lot of the statistics about what's going on in craft brewing right now, as well as some color commentary. A lot of the statistics will be based on 2016 January through December numbers. And the commentary will be more brought up to date to the present time. All right, things are changing. Things seem very different than they have the last few years. It's a very crowded marketplace. It's a competitive market. There's over 5,300 breweries in the country right now, and there's about the same amount, maybe slightly more shelf space than we've seen in the past. So it's a new world out there. Things have changed significantly, particularly for the regional brewers who are being squeezed from the large brewers above and the smaller local brewers below. So I think we're beyond the point where everyone's rising with craft. I think we're at a point where different companies have to differentiate a little bit between each other and try to figure out their own competencies and figure out where they fit, figure out their own branding, and it's going to be more competitive going forward than it is today. We're seeing more than 2 brewery openings per day, which is a lot. That's been 10 more breweries since I got here to DC. The large brewer acquisitions are slowing down a little bit, so that's a slight change. But what we are seeing is large brewers using some of the brands that they've purchased in the last few years and starting to do some retail shops with them. So we're seeing taking those same brand names and kind of putting satellite locations in various places, or second breweries, third breweries, fourth breweries in places. But I think the important thing there is the large brewers are now in the retail game, and they're hitting more and more markets that way. So that is having an impact for a lot of people in this room. Distribution is very crowded as well. Distributors have really done a great job in the last 10 years of learning about craft, figuring out how craft works in their system, but with 5,300 breweries, with a lot of them wanting to be in the distribution world, they're finding that it's tough to pick up everybody. Just because you make great beer is not a guarantee that you will get distribution anymore. The healthiest part of the craft segment continues to be microbreweries and tap rooms. Bart's going to get into the specific stats there, but for a lot of people in this room, you can't make enough beer. Your demand is is growing faster than you can produce, and so that's a nice spot to be in. But I will caution you that it may not always be that way, so make sure you make your business decisions wisely. And there's still growth out there. As much as it feels like, oh, craft is slowing down, that's true, but there's still a lot of growth out there, and somebody's going to get that growth. It might be large brewers climbing into the craft space. It might be craft brewers doing lighter styles climbing into what was formerly the big brewer space. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It could be import brands. Mexican imports tend to be really hot right now. So there's a lot of growth still available out there, and so you got to figure out how to get it if that's what you're aiming for.
Great. As we move into the statistic portion of this presentation, I want to remind everyone that all these statistics rely on the BA's craft brewer definition of small, independent, and traditional. One of the most frequent questions I get these days is, what would growth be if, with then some variant of asking about the acquired brands? And when we're measuring our industry, the craft brewing industry, we're trying to measure the health of independent brewers, and so that's what we're going to show today. In that, when we think about this too, infusions of capital are very different than the access to distribution and retail that being acquired by a large brewer brings. So we're trying to differentiate there and really look at the health of independent brewers. Let's start with the headline. Craft brewing growth slowed, but was still growth at 6%. We think about this in the context of the total US economy, 6% is pretty darn good. And that's volume growth. As we're going to see, dollar sales growth was even stronger. Other parts of the beer business grew as well. Paul mentioned Mexican imports. We saw import growth also be strong. Another premium priced product as beer drinkers continue to trade up, grew 7%. The overall beer market was flat, and that means that we saw non-craft domestic brewers go down by 2% last year. A lot of the press goes to the acquired brands, but if you take holistically all of the domestic specialty brands that aren't independent, they only grew 2%. This means that beer drinkers, and we see this in our surveys, do support small and independent, and they're showing it with their dollars when they're purchasing.
All right, we're going to provide some of the background, some of the landscape of what's going on. 2016 saw the finalization of the biggest deal ever in beer when Anheuser-Busch InBev bought SAB Miller. Here in North America, that meant that one of the disposals was that Molson Coors has now picked up the former Miller Coors. So there's, you know, the #1 brewer in the world bought the #2 brewer in the world. There can't be a bigger deal in beer. The large brewers have, since we saw really the first step in this wave of massive, massive brewer consolidation in 2008, the big brewers have lost 24.5 million barrels of volume in this country. That's a lot. That's almost the whole craft segment. But don't cry for me, Brazil. Profitability has gone up from about a $5 billion supplier profit pool in the US up to around $8 billion over that time period. So in sloughing off, the more beer you don't make, the more money you make? How's that work? But it's true that these companies are extremely profitable. Anheuser-Busch InBev worldwide makes over $15 billion a year in profit. And there's no bigger deal to make in beer. What's the next step? I've got my own thoughts, but I'll leave that to you to speculate yourselves. I'd say there's growing customer uncertainty out there. A lot of people really care about small and independent brewers, and they want to support small and independent brewers. There's some people who don't care about small and independent brewers. They just want to have a beer. They don't want to think about it. But I think what we're seeing in some of the market data is that a lot of customers out there are making wrong assumptions and don't know who is still small and independent and who's not. Certain companies are assumed that they've been acquired when they haven't. They're still small and independent brewers. Other companies are assumed to be small and independent when in fact they've been acquired. So the beer drinker really is not certain in a lot of cases, a good percentage of the population, about who is small and independent. We've seen some increased regulatory actions. State actions in Massachusetts, Washington State, and California addressed issues such as paying for tap handles, retailer dominance, purchasing of things of value for retailers like coolers. As well, at the federal level, the Tax and Trade Bureau has clarified some of the category management practices. With TTB ruling 2016-1 basically says that a supplier can only provide a suggested planogram. That's all they can provide a retailer. So we'll see where this goes. As the states flex some muscles, maybe they'll be doing some more enforcement activity out in the states. And we'll see where the TTB goes with their trade practice activities. Craft capacity decisions. The last few years we've had some really nice growth. But some companies, they hit it right on and things are great for their companies. Other companies missed a little bit in their decision making on capacity. And I think one thing we're seeing is, it used to be breweries that didn't quite make it were open, then they closed. Now we're starting to see some breweries drop into bankruptcies, and so it's a little different environment out there. But capacity is a major factor in that. Bart's going to get into that in a little bit. Like I mentioned, the large brewer acquiring feeding frenzy has slowed a bit. There was a lot more activity in 2015 than 2016. And I have questions about how united the craft brewing industry can be going forward. Are there going to be divisions over age of breweries, or growth rates of breweries, or business models, or size? Can we stay together as a community? I sure hope so. because we have something special here, and I'd really like to retain that. And just being around this conference, I definitely see that there's a lot of real positive spirit and a good sense that we are all trying to achieve something together in a movement. So just leave it there. Oh, my turn. Sorry. We've seen this before. How many old-timers remember this cover of the New Brewer? This is the cover of the 1997 May-June issue, the statistical issue. The cover words there are "Growth slows in a crowded market." 20 years ago next month. And what have we seen since then? We've seen the industry go through a few slower years. Then we saw brewers really focus on quality. We saw a lot of customer awareness about beer styles and what is a good beer. And people adopted a love of hops, and we've seen IPAs take off, and we saw some really booming years in the last few years. But I think right now we are at a point where growth is slowing in a crowded market, and it's just it's a cute thing. Bob Pease brought that to my attention back in the fall. Like, remember this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. So are we cyclical? Does this mean that it's going to be a dark time from here on out? Heck no. But Allison Levine yesterday I think was right. Fear is a good thing. Focusing on what you need to do to adapt to the situation is critical going forward.
Great. So let's start digging into the numbers and seeing some of those variations a little bit more. Volume share inched up in 2016 to 12.3% by volume. In some regards, even staying flat was very impressive, as we saw 1.2 million barrels leave the category due to big brewer acquisitions. That means that 6% growth, 1.4 million barrels brought us up, and we actually increased the share that small and independent brewers have in the marketplace to 12.3%. Dollar sale growth was a little bit stronger, and so dollar share of retail, that's consumer spending, got to 21.9%. That was a little bit faster because we continue to see healthy pricing, which we'll get into, and as we've seen growth move into the tail, that's where retail value relative to production value tends to be a little bit higher. Growth slowed, as we already discussed, down from 18%, then 12%, and then finally 6% last year. I'd urge those in the room to think about this a little bit more as the new normal. You can't keep growing 18% year over year, every year when you get to an industry that is our size. At 25 million barrels, 18% is more than 4 million barrels of incremental additions. That's just not happening anymore. So we need to think about this growth rate as more the new normal, and I think it's going to stick around for at least a couple of years. Barrel growth looks a little bit better. Because we're a bigger industry, even at a slower growth rate, we're still adding a lot of barrels to the industry. So 1.4 million barrels, that's the 5th best year craft's ever had. And I think we sometimes lose that sentiment, in seeing a little bit of a slowdown in growth, but it's still growth, and it was still a great year collectively. The flip side of that is that with 5,300 plus breweries, it's a much more fractured growth than ever before. So that growth per brewery is going to be lower, and it's going to be much more challenging to take big chunks of market growth, even if there's a lot of absolute growth still out there.
We've been gathering more insights in terms of what the beer drinker is thinking out there. And local is still in. It's a major decision point for buyers in all sorts of consumer packaged goods categories. It's probably even more pronounced in beer because people take their beer very personally. The beer they drink, they want to treat themselves to something really nice. They want to support a local business. Maybe they've been to a tap room and they're, feel that sense of community around that, but local continues to be in. We're also looking at occasions and where craft really nails the occasions for beverage alcohol drinkers is the area of trying something new. People look to us as a place to do something exciting with what we drink, and so we have a good spot right there. I know that's a pain in the neck when it comes to Rotation Nation. You fight hard to get that tap placement, and all of a sudden a keg is gone, and your tap handle is gone, and that's really hard, and it adds cost to the system. But that is the new reality, and the reason that that's okay is because we are here to serve the beer drinker, and that's what the beer drinker wants. They want something new and different, and there are retail establishments that base their business on moving that around. So sure, it's difficult, but we do have that space. Another space we have is, that's growing is the culinary side, the beer and food connection. Our chef, Adam Dooley, he was just cooking dinner at the James Beard House last Friday, so on National Beer Day, which I think is pretty darn cool. But it's definitely being recognized. The folks at Nielsen see it in their data that connecting beer and food is becoming more and more important. You know, we work our workaday lives, we read the trade press, and you know, we get a little stressed out about all this, but you have to remember, beer is fun. That's why people are drinking beers, because they want to have a good time. They want to share a beer with friends and talk over the events of the day. And so always remember, keep the fun in it. If you're not having fun in this business anymore, maybe it's time to go. But because the rest of us will keep having fun. So beer is fun. Let's keep our eye on that. And of course, the beer drinkers are loving tap rooms and making that community connection. You know, at the association, we are very much focused on defending the rights of taproom owners to operate their businesses that way and maybe even expand some of those privileges. And you know, our beer drinkers love us. This is part of the special nature of craft, is we create community. We're seeing tap rooms that are becoming like family establishments where the kids come in. We see cornhole, you know, out in the side yard. We're seeing a lot of really good stuff, and I think we're better as a society for it. And I also see that kind of community, you know, urban marketplace type of thing, always including breweries, and it's interesting to see.
We can look at that and we can see some of the data on tasting room sales and at the brewery sales. And these are really being driven by the beer lover preferences that Paul just outlined. So in 2016, those grew to 2.3 million barrels. It's about 9% of total craft production, up from 1.75 million barrels the year before. These are a valuable opportunity for any business, provides marketing, direct customer interaction, a platform for innovation, not to mention a nice profit margin. And it's a place to build brands. We looked at our survey, and we found microbreweries. We looked at ones that had tasting room data from 2015 and 2016, and those grew by 25% on average, and 88% of that was still through distribution. So it's growing the brand out in wider distribution, not just necessarily in the tasting room. For the retailers in the room, you can share in this growth as well. You just have to take some of the lessons, and this is true if you're thinking about opening a tasting room too. The beer lover is going to these places because they're getting the things we heard about on stage: clean draft lines, proper glassware, knowledgeable servers, not to mention wonderful flavored beers. And hopefully this will cause everyone to raise their game, and we'll get a better beer experience whether you're drinking in a tasting room or in your favorite local bar. There's obviously continue to be closings, and we've seen that rate tick up in 2016. At some level, this isn't too much of a worry for the industry, since percentage-wise, with 5,300 breweries, this is one of the lowest levels of closings we've ever seen. I don't think that can last forever, and we should expect this number to rise. I've been saying this for years. The BLS tracks data on new business establishments, and 50% of them close within 5 years. Obviously, we've beaten those odds for a while in the brewing industry because we have rising demand, passionate owners, lots of fans who really want to come and support our businesses. But that's going to only help delay some of those odds. In the long run, we have to expect that with more competition, there are going to be more closings. The flip side is that more people still want to come in. Even as growth slows, we still had over 800 openings, and I'd expect this number to rise as we get some of the final state lists and comb through that final data. So more than 800 openings in 2016. And this isn't going anywhere. So at the end of March, the TTB was tracking more than 7,700 brewery permits, which means that there's more than 2,000 breweries that are not just in planning, but have gone far enough to get a brewery permit. For those in the room, these breweries are coming, and you can either lament it or you can prepare for it. One of the worries that with all these breweries coming online is that we're going to get to a state of overcapacity. And we have some good news here from our survey. So we looked at our production to capacity ratio, which had actually been dropping the last couple of years, and it held a little bit flatter in 2016. So that suggests that people are getting the message that maybe it's time to rein in some of those expansions. We had 1,000 breweries that provided us production and capacity data in both 2015 and 2016, and those breweries only collectively grew their capacity by 2.8%, so below that rate of growth. You can see here that that average didn't change too much and that the total capacity didn't change too much for small and independent brewers, but that static average can be a little bit misleading. We're certainly going to see brewers who have too much capacity and are over-leveraged and have a lot of debt, that, a lot of capital tied up in that capacity that they're not using, which is going to pose challenges. At the same time, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of brewers who are still going to be looking for more capacity, because as we're going to see, small brewers are still growing at a tremendous rate. So there's going to be a lot of variation here, brewery by brewery. Pricing increases continue to be healthy. This is from IRI Group scan data, so this is off-premise, where the average case price rose $1.02 last year. That was 2.9%, up to a total average case price of $36. For those in the room, I would think less about this average and more about what you're doing to justify your pricing strategy, whatever it is for your company. We've been part of a premiumization. Craft has always been something that the consumer is willing to pay a little bit more for a product that they view as a little bit better. But I think gone are the days where you can justify that premium just by being small and local. And so everyone's going to have to think more and more about what you're doing to justify the price that you're charging. Breaking down the growth by business model, we see a lot of variations. BrewPubs had a great year, up nearly 15% to more than 1.35 million barrels produced. We're seeing a lot of different models of brewpub, and there's still tremendous creativity around the world's best marriage of beer and food. Though my wife's in the room, so I might downgrade that stat to second best marriage. Brewpubs are doing a lot of different things, and we're seeing people really, as I said on stage the year before, break out of that pub concept and do a lot of new innovative things. Microbreweries have been the clear winner of business models in recent years, driven by tasting rooms, as well as the ability to be small and nimble in their local markets. They grew 27% last year. That rate would be a little bit lower if we just look at breweries that were open in 2015 as well, since some of that growth comes from the tremendous amount of new openings. The majority of those 800 openings were microbreweries. But this is clearly a business model that beer lovers are passionate about, and the total microbrewery category grew to 5 million barrels collectively. So while they are small, together they're making a lot of beer. We can't sugarcoat that regional craft brewers had the toughest go of it in 2016. They've got small, nimble competitors in local markets, not to mention suddenly, big, powerful brands that have been acquired and now have a lot of advantages in distribution and retail. Regional struggled, growing slightly less than 1% last year. And you'll see when you see the total industry stats, if you look at it, this category actually shrank a little bit because of those acquired brands that left it. So it's going to be a challenge. This should also give some pause to microbreweries and brewpubs as you think about wider distribution, because as you grow and you move further away from home, you're going to face similar challenge to what these regional craft brewers are facing. One of the headwinds that regionals faced was we saw slowing export growth in 2016. This was driven by a variety of factors, one of which was simply the strong dollar relative to the currency in some of our key export markets, places like Canada, the UK, and the rest of Europe. But we're also seeing small, nimble local competitors in a lot of these places that we're exporting to. The US was really the birthplace of the craft brewing revolution, but that's now something we've exported to the rest of the world. So there's a lot of countries where they have similar, if not higher, per capita rates of breweries. In styles, I've been on stage here at CBC for 4 years, which means I've gotten to talk about IPAs 4 times. And this year is no different. So you can see that IPA continued to be one of the growth engines, growing at 22%, well beyond the category rate. This is off-premise data, again, from the IRI group, so it might be slightly different overall. But certainly, even if we looked at on-premise, IPA is one of the engines of growth for craft, and it's not going away anytime soon. We are seeing variations, though, and some changing growth coming from lighter styles. So here we picked out just some of the lighter styles that grew, and this is BA-defined craft. So this isn't including large brewer brands. And you can see that there were a variety of lighter styles that saw tremendous growth in 2016. I think there's a bunch of reasons for this. We're starting to see an aging craft consumer that's maybe looking for something a little more sessionable. We're seeing, as Paul talked about, brew pubs and tap rooms as community gathering places where people are coming and they're looking for something, a little bit different. We're attracting more people in, and so we need to have beers for more occasions. And finally, I think, you're just seeing that this is the biggest part of the beer market. And as craft has grown, we're starting to tap into the wider beer market. And so we have to be making lighter styles, since that's still the vast majority of the US beer market. Now, I've talked about national stats for the last 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm not going to tell you to throw all those out the window, but you need to take everything with a grain of salt, because one of the things we definitely saw this year is real variation place by place in what's going on. So, even though they're the same color on this map, Tennessee and California are completely different markets now, and we're seeing a divergence in what's going on in parts of the country that are still very fast growing, with leading markets where we've definitely seen a slowdown. You can see this in scan data. So I just took the entire country and I broke it into two groups: states that have above average craft share and states that have below average craft share. The states with above average craft share grew less than 2% last year in scan data. The states with below average craft share grew almost 8% last year. So we can see a pretty big divergence. And obviously, even within those states, there's going to be variation market to market. If you're in one of those leading states, you have two choices. One, you can start thinking about other markets, which is challenging in an era when local is predominant, or you can start to think about new ways to grow in your existing market. How can we take more occasions from wine and spirits? How can we do new things to bring in new demographics and find new growth? If you're one of those below average states, you're in a great place now because we're seeing that virtuous cycle where craft's really coming online. But I'd urge you to think a couple of years down the road and start preparing, looking at those leading states and thinking about what that looks like. As we've seen nationally, 18% becomes 6% very rapidly.
All right, I want to talk about a few other kind of extraneous topics that do impact what we're doing. The first is 0.05 BAC level. Utah last month passed a full DUI bill to go into effect December 30th, 2018, which moves that BAC level for driving to 0.05. That could have a chilling effect on beverage alcohol sales, on restaurant businesses. This is scary if it starts to spread through other parts of the country. No one wants to see anyone get hurt from someone misusing alcohol and getting behind the wheel. But the vast majority of problems when it comes to accidents or deaths are for people who are high BAC offenders, 0.19, 0.20, or repeat offenders. And this 0.05 legislation does nothing to really get at the real problem that's there. Trade practice violations are definitely something that's on the radar. Talked about that before. Brewing great beer is no longer enough. You need the right capacity decisions. You need the right distribution deals. You need the right branding. You need the right appreciation of a fan base and use of social media to help build a brand. So there's a whole lot of other factors, a bunch that I haven't even mentioned, that impact that. So, brewing great beer is table stakes. The quality panel hopefully will get everyone in this room up to the place of brewing great beer, right? Right? Okay. Hey, I got a question for you. There's a lot of speculation on what legalized cannabis will do for the craft brewing industry. And so I want to see what people in this room think. Three answers. Legalized cannabis will reduce craft beer sales, will have minimal impact, or will improve craft beer sales. Who thinks it's going to reduce craft beer sales? Who thinks it'll be about the same? Who thinks it's going to improve craft beer sales? Wow, very solidly in the middle. Very solidly in the middle as having minimal effect. I didn't really know how it would go. I thought it'd be about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split, but very interesting. A lot of reasons for optimism still. 6% growth is something that almost every industry would be extremely happy with. We've built businesses that people love in our communities. We're integral players in our communities. We support charities. People come to us. They know us. And that's not going to change. People love to be a part of their breweries. Premiumization is not swinging back. It's been going forward for 40 years or so. People like to spend a little bit more on something they really want to drink. It treats themselves, and the problem with the declining sales of domestic light lager and sub-premium lagers, I think, is more related to where they are in the marketplace, less so than particular branding issues. There are some brand life cycle things to think about there, but people are going up. They're going for flavor, and they're willing to spend some money on it. And inclusiveness is, I think, a great opportunity for us. You know, craft is underdeveloped when it comes to women and minorities, both as employees and as customers. And this is a, you know, a very green field for us if we can figure out how to unlock that. I think it starts with that there's work to do. I think we want to stay away from names and labels that could be offensive. I think that turns off people. You know, the most diverse crowd I've seen here this week was Monday afternoon at the First Timers orientation. It was a remarkable crowd, and it was very different than what we've seen at craft brewers conferences in the past. So I think we're making progress, and I think we're getting there. You know, tomorrow at the members meeting, we're going to hear about some of our diversity work that's going on. But I think, you know, our future success may depend on broadening our industry, both in employees and the marketplace. With that, for the last slide, I think I'm going to turn it over to Bart.
Once again, thanks to all the great work that everyone in this room did last year, we're happy to announce that craft beer sales are at an all-time high. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.